The high-octane 2021 elections were from day one of the presidential nominations on November 2nd, 2020 to keen observers a harbinger for what would happen next. 17 days later into the presidential campaigns, what ought to have been an exercise of democracy was a bloodbath. In spontaneous protests that broke out at noon on November 18th, supporters of Robert Kyagulanyi, widely known as Bobi Wine and leader of the National Unity Platform, barricaded roads as news of his arrest for violating COVID-19 SOPs in Luka district filtered through. As police engaged in running battles with the supporters and seemingly overwhelmed, military reinforcements joined in, including a motley gang of security operatives dressed in civilian attire. More chaos ensued by both sides, but worst by some rogue elements in police and military as they went about shooting brazenly. After 2 days of the riots, it was carnage. A police inquiry put the official death toll to 54, majority of whom had nothing to do with the protesters and were simply ducking for cover. Before this crescendo of events, the Forum for Democratic Change candidate Patrick Oboy Amuriat and Kyagulanyi and their supporters had been repeatedly harassed, beaten and arrested in scenes that were seemingly setting the stage. In the aftermath, then Security Minister General Eli Tumwine, now deceased, sent a tough message to the public. Addressing the nation, he defended the security forces' action and declared unapologetically that police had the right to shoot and kill protesters if deemed necessary.
Police has a right to shoot you and kill you if you reach a certain level of violence. Can I repeat? Police has a right, or any security, if you reach a certain level, they have a right to shoot you and you'll die for jail for nothing.
The rest of the campaign period offered little reprieve. Tear gas and live ammunitions became commonplace at opposition rallies. Amuriat's campaign train through Mbale, Kitgum, Gulu, Masindi and other towns was regularly interrupted by security forces who cited COVID-19 regulations as justification for dispersing crowds. He was arrested at least 5 times in under 2 months. Kyagulanyi's campaign was not different. Tear gas and bullets greeted his supporters. On December 30th, while campaigning in Kalangala, he was briefly detained and dozens of his supporters were arrested. Meanwhile, the ruling National Resistance Movement enjoyed a relatively smooth campaign, attracting large crowds even with the lingering COVID-19 threat for which opposition rallies were gauged. Critics likened the atmosphere in the NRM camp to a festive banquet, while the opposition endured what they described as state-sponsored violence. But it wasn't just opposition politicians nor their supporters under attack. Journalists too found themselves in the crosshairs. Media coverage of opposition events was restricted and several journalists were physically attacked while on duty. On December 27th, Ashraf Kasirie, a ghetto media journalist, was critically injured while covering a rally in Masaka. Others, including then NTV's Ali Mivule and NBS's Daniel Lutaya, faced similar fates.
What have we done to them? What's this clinic called?
Military men were pointing guns directly at these people, at these borders, and also they were wielding sticks. So because of the fear, I think the borders just rammed into each other, and then I was on one of those borders.
The state's posture was summed up by the then Inspector General of Police Martin Zokoth Ochola, who defended the assault on journalists by claiming that for their own good they'd be beaten to help them understand not to go where there is danger. In this case, the danger he was referring to were opposition campaigns.
Yes, we shall beat you for your own sake, to help you understand that you don't go there. We shall use reasonable force to ensure that you don't go where there's a risk. That's what I have no apology. Actually, you are saying, is the police apologizing for mishandling journalists? My answer is, I'm very sorry, excuse me, we shall not apologize.
As polling day neared, the clampdown intensified. Just 2 days before the January 14th vote, The Uganda Communications Commission ordered internet service providers to block access to social media platforms. By January 13th, the entire country was plunged into an internet blackout that lasted 5 days. Despite the violent backdrop, voting went ahead. The Electoral Commission declared Museveni the winner for a sixth term, securing 58.38% of the votes against Kyagulanyi's 35.08%. As Uganda now heads towards another election cycle, political analysts warn of a worrying trend. With each election they Ijjo, the levels of violence and state interference have grown steadily. The Uganda People's Defence Forces, traditionally separate from domestic policing, have increasingly taken on central role in managing civilian protests and opposition rallies.
The UPDF has not transformed from NRA. Their role in elections makes them as a military wing of the ruling party. They don't come off as a national army that should safeguard the common good of the country. They come in to brutalize opposition. They've been camped at the NUP offices for about a month or two before the electoral period. They never come in to interfere on the side of NRM.
Many times the security forces have become the drive for most of this violence and blame it on the people. One of the key recommendations for us as civil society organizations in 2005 when we moved around the country and we came up on the Citizens Pact was on the involvement of the military in the electoral process. Whereas we agree that there is need for the police and their minimal participation in these processes to ensure peace and security, what we see today is that it seems to be a military operation.
Analysts also point to the proliferation of shadowy state-aligned groups whose role appears to be the enforcement of intimidation and violence during campaigns. From the Kalangala Action Plan of 2001 to Boda Boda 2010 in 2011, the Crime Preventers in 2016, and now the emerging ghetto structure, each group allegedly serves as a buffer to allow the state to distance itself from direct culpability in abuses.
So he is creating another structure for violence in Kampala, where he knows he has no support, and the neighboring districts like Wakiso and Mukono, and citizens should not be taken by surprise if this ghetto structure takes over, crime, committing crimes in the Kampala metropolitan area during elections.
What I'll tell you is that most of these groups, of course, have been government initiated, and there's been a lot of discussion towards that direction. And most of these individuals, we've seen them coming out to say that we were paid, we were facilitated by individuals from government to either push a specific direction or to create fear. And I think fear is one of the things that has the highest price in our electoral process. Create fear and prevail the whole elections.
With less than 2 months until the campaigns for the 2026 elections officially begin, Uganda finds itself at another critical juncture. The lessons or lack thereof from 2021 could determine whether the upcoming elections will be a step toward democratic maturity or a repeat of the blood-sustained ballot that came before. David Ijjo, NTV.